What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by EST rapper Dubbo. Basically, this product is called Old Lights, New Lights, and it came out in the late spring in 2014. So the thing about this particular product is just the fact that Dubbo was kind of a low-key rapper. He was a part of the EST boys from is part of the EST boys from the early 2010s as far as that pitch went, which was basically MGK's collective as far as that particular pitch went with it. Now, MGK had been around since like the mid-late 2000s pitches like that. They had dropped a project. There is at least a prior Dubbo project that I know about. I don't know a ton about the projects that Dubbo's done. He may not have done a super ton of these, but he's at least done a couple. There's one that's called like ESD for Life that came out in 2012. I want to say I might have reviewed that one, but I think I'm going to get to it eventually. If I haven't, I would have to say there's some ones that I did review. I want to say there was a MGK project from 2012 that I reviewed that was not Lace Up. That was pretty good pitch. There was one besides like Half Naked and Almost Famous, I would have to say, which was an EP from 2012 as well. But there was a mixtape that MGK dropped that was a collaboration mixtape with Dubbo. Came out in August of 2012. Some good pitches. But Dubbo, surprisingly, he put out an album just within that relative pitch. This is kind of a very low key project. I've been meaning to review this project for about 5 years now. I wanted to review this back in the summer of 2019, but just never got around to it. It's just kind of dredgy for me. It just was kind of lazy, I guess, and pitches like that. It just didn't amalgamate well with me back in those days. I have known about at least a few songs off this particular album for a good while now. Songs like Reppin' That and Dope and some of those type ones I've known about for a good while. I do have some of those around, but it's just kind of the pitch about it. But I would have to say this is a digital only album. Unfortunately, I would have liked if this would have been on CD. MGK's at least on this project once. It's kind of the concept. There's not a ton of guests on here, but he basically just reps for Cleveland and pitches like that. Cleveland, Ohio, as far as that particular pitch kind of goes, similar to MGK and stuff. But the thing about this particular album is just how low key it is in particular. I would have to say it's a good concept just to get some of these residential type gems. I feel like a lot of this is just kind of midweek type music, not necessarily. I feel like there's definitely some bops on here for like weekend type fare, but compared to some of this stuff as the more glitzy type moments, I feel like the concept of some of this just reminds me more Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday music. It's not in terms of quality, like these aren't good turn up songs, but it just kind of reminds me of just kind of not necessarily ho hum. This is not ho hum in quality, but just kind of ho hum in terms of like the aspect of just like the littiness factor in terms of kind of ho hum in terms of like the littiness factor as to how crazy the turn up kind of gets. It just reminds me of something that you would listen to if you're going to go bar hopping Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that. But you had work the next day, some of those type pitches, just some basic kind of mild turn up, just like it's more kind of college rap pitches like that. Not necessarily student rap as if you're in college or something like that, but just the concept of just you've got stuff to do the next day, pitches like that, work or school, some of those type pitches, just to kind of get turned up, but just keep get turned up to stay 10 toes down and down to earth with just realizing that you have some responsibilities still to kind of do. Now, I realize that I realize off this particular project that is pretty low key just within those relative aspects. So it's just kind of the concept of just being able to say there's some good turn up type here. And I would have to say just about this. Now, Dubbo is not necessarily. This is turn up just within the sense of being pretty similar to MGK just within those this is turn up similar to MGK just within those relative fashions, but it's just kind of the concept. It just feels like the budget is slightly lower just within that pitch. I do feel like he's kind of MGK's wingman as far as that particular kind of goes, but you don't see a ton of the affiliates that MGK kind of worked with. I just would have to say I'm trying to think of some folks that he would work with in like the lace up days, but Tezo is not on here pitches like that. There's just other folks. I don't know how many other folks were part of the EST boys as far as that particular kind of went. Some folks that would have produced like MGK's Wild Boy, some of that type pitch. It's just kind of an awkward time just because MGK wasn't really around in 2014. Just kind of an interesting pitch that he was repping for Cleveland. Pitches like that. It's not to say some good bops on here, but we'll go ahead and get to this. I'm not really sure what the singles were, but out of 13 songs, I actually wound up recommending 8.5. And not to say actually like I was surprised, like I figured this album was not going to be good, but just the concept was just this low key type album. Just the fact that Dubbo doesn't really have that many solo projects, pitches like that. He has at least two mixtapes from what I noticed. I downloaded one back in the day, and then there was also the EST for Life project from 2012. So there's at least three projects that Dubbo's done, but I'd say it's a pretty good project here. Just being able to say it's actually in some cases, I would say I'm almost prepared to give this a higher score than I gave Lace Up back in 2015 when I reviewed that, I'd have to say. But so basically, say I'll go ahead and recommend the 8.5 songs I recommend out of 13. So they'd be Reppin' That, Doing Numbers, Dope, Chopping Trees, That's That Nigga, Can't Help Myself, Better Days, and New Lights. And the almost song is Chill Nigga. So talk about some of these. Like Chill Nigga is a pretty nice one. This one definitely reminds me of Kendrick Lamar house party type vibes, pretty similar to like Poetic Justice and some of those type songs off of Good Kid, Mad City. It's definitely a pretty hit album from Kendrick as far as that pitch can went, but this just has that relative kind of This particular song has that relative 90s poetic justice type feel as far as that pitch kind of goes along with it. Just around the block kind of snackage hit, I'd have to say in particular. Pretty good concept for that. But it's an almost song just because I look after the concept as the relative pitch, just the relative pitch behind how many times I'd listen to it in particular. I like this song just in particular as far as that kind of goes along. I like this particular song as far as that kind of goes along with it, but I just would have to say the concept of it is just because I don't drink as much in pitches like that. This makes me wonder the affability behind listening to it. I mean, in the right aspect of being at a house party, some of those type pitches, in the right aspect of being at a house party, some of those type pitches, this song works extremely well. I'd have to say, but if you're not kind of in a more residential or frat party type shindig, something like that, it just doesn't have the same effect. I'd say this is kind of an awkward type one to listen to. But talk about some of these on here. Basically, Dope is a real nice one. This is a real jazzy kind of midweek residential city hopping of a song, I'd have to say in particular. This is definitely a get some Popeyes and Swishers type song to kind of get in particular. And this is just an in a good mood and kind of thrilling song, I'd have to say. So Dubbo does have some turn up type songs on here, but I feel like a lot of these are just midweek type ones, more Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, like I was saying before, pitches like that. This is just a good litty song, but compared to some of the more crazy type ones, like I feel like Repping That and Doing Numbers are probably the two crazy songs off this particular album. But even those are kind of relatively, it's not to say they're bad songs, it's just kind of the concept that they just feel like the energy in terms of like the sheer kind of craziness factor, just the pitch behind the delivery behind them is just more of like a 7 out of 10. Now this album's going to probably get a higher score than a 7 out of 10, something like that, relatively, I'd have to suppose. But just look after it, compared to like MGK's Wild Boy or one of those type songs. I'm trying to think of some other hit songs by MGK, like Rap Devil, some of those type ones in particular, like just some of MGK's craziest hits, some of those type ones. I'm surprised I don't know more MGK, but he really didn't have that many singles off of Lace Up. I mean, apart from Wild Boy, that was really about as far as it went. He had Stereo and some of those type ones and Invincible, but it's just kind of concept. He didn't have a ton of turn up type songs, but Dope is pretty good midweek type one. Just some good Tuesday music, I'd have to say. Doing Numbers is probably one of the best songs on this particular album. This is definitely pretty glitzy type one. This had a lot of popularity on Spotify, I'd say. Now, this is a pretty low key album on Spotify, I'd have to say in particular, but I do appreciate it enough to kind of say there's some good moments on here. Doing Numbers is like a glitzy kind of turn up pounding song to get tore up to, I would have to say in particular. It's definitely one of the album's flashiest songs, I'd have to say, and this song just has a swirling beat. This is one of the best productions on this particular album, I'd have to say. This one's up there with like Reppin' That, and Chopping Trees is a pretty good one, and Better Days is a pretty blurry type one that works extremely well. And then I was actually surprised by the quality of New Lights. That's a pretty nice one as well. But Doing Numbers is probably one of the most glitzy type ones. It's like the most ravenous type energy, I'd have to say. But it still kind of feels like this might be more Thursday music more so than Friday or Saturday. I'd have to say this in particular, but it's a good enough concept. Definitely Dubbo on some of his craziest. Reppin' That's a real nice one. This has MGK to back him up on this particular song. It's a pretty nice one. This is like a flashy kind of night venue hitter of a song, I'd have to say in particular. There's some nice turn up blitz of a song, I'd have to say in particular. And this is just the vintage kind of ESD heat, I'd have to say. This is kind of an uncommon this song is kind of an uncommon gem to get crunk to, I'd have to say in particular. So it's a good enough concept. This probably could have been the single. I'm not for certain, but this is the most popular song according to Spotify. This has almost 700,000 hits, I'd have to say in particular, which is pretty good for Dubbo as far as that pitch can goes, considering that this is his only project on Spotify. Really low key type cat. He was on a bunch of mixtapes with MGK and pitches like that, but just being able to say it's just kind of the concept of this is just him repping, filling the place of MGK, taking care of it in one of MGK's off years as far as that pitching goes. It's a real nice glitzy type one to kind of get here. MGK should have been on here a second time. I realized that Dubbo probably didn't want to have to. I realized that Dubbo probably didn't want to use MGK as a crush, but I definitely think he should have been on here at least a second time on like a hook or something like that. Just something else that probably should have been on here just with some Wild Boy type vibes or some stereo type vibes, something like that, I'd have to say. It's a good enough concept. So Chopping Trees is a real nice one. This is like a good litty smokage and basic night thrills of a song, and that it's like a good litty smokage and basic night thrills hit of a song, I'd have to say in particular. It's like some good Tuesday and midweek type music, I'd have to say in particular. And this is a great one to get torched to. So it's a pretty good concept. Once again, this is just some real kind of basic type stuff here, just a real vanilla type beat that kind of is a little bit of trap, a little bit of like mid early. It's kind of a little bit of trap, a little bit of early 2010s type fare just within that relative pitch. It has similarities. This album has similarities to Lace Up by MGK, I'd have to say in particular. It's just a little bit glitzier compared to the fact that it was released about 2 years later as far as the pitch goes. So it's just some good pizzazz to kind of get here, I'd have to say in particular. These are just some nice ones to kind of get. I do like the fact that Dubbo does at least get turned up despite the fact that some of these are kind of despite the fact that these are more homebound and kind of more romping, kind of residential city hopping, I would say these are more residential city hopping. I'd have to say these are still some pretty nice ones to kind of get here, I'd have to say. So yeah, that's That Nigga's a real nice one. This is like a swamp kind of murky house party noise of a song I'd have to say in particular. It's like some gritty kind of residential dredge version of like It's like some gritty residential type fare, I'd have to say in particular, and this like a dredged version of like thrift shop, I'd have to say. So that's that nigga is probably the better house party type cut to kind of get between that one and chill nigga, I'd have to say. Between that one and chill nigga, I'd have to say in particular, it's just a good enough concept. But I do definitely feel like this definitely reminds me of Thrift Shop by Macklemore. I'd have to say in particular, not quite as poppy, not quite as pop rap as far as the particular pitch kind of goes, but definitely one that just kind of has murkiness. Just something that Mac Miller would kind of do, just in a more gritty type sense of that. Just a more kind of not I almost want to say a more ghetto version of that particular type pitch, but just something that just kind of feels like slumish, just something out of the slums, some pitches like that. Just a real low key type one to kind of get for some house party type fare, real good smokage, and just 12 pack of beer type stuff to kind of get in particular. Just pitches like that, just some good stuff to kind of have. Real nice swamp one, I'd have to say. And then Can't Help Myself is a pretty nice one, like this particular one. The aspect about this one, it's like a starry kind of out on the town exuberance of a song, I'd have to say in particular. It's like a nice evening pet for some social snaz, I'd have to say, and this is a pretty good vehicle gem. So there are some vehicle gems on here, like Can't Help Myself, Doing Numbers. I feel like Can't Help Myself, Doing Numbers, Better Days are some good vehicle bound type ones to kind of get in particular. This is kind of like this is just around the city type one. This is definitely a more residential type fare. If you do live in like a relatively modest or fair sized city pitches like that. This is just kind of one for just kind of being out and about throughout the town. Not necessarily as big as New York or San Antonio or Los Angeles, some of those type places, Detroit, some of those type places, but just a relatively large, but not necessarily small, but just relatively modest sized city pitches like that, where you just know the places around and pitches like that. Just some good type just some good residential type stuff for car cruising and city hopping pitches like that. Just night traverse and strolls as far as that particular pitch can goes. There's some good stuff for that. Some good stuff for that, and overall just feels as far as that pitch can go. So I'd have to say Better Days is a pretty nice one. This is like another blurry type one. This is another good cruise out type one. This is like a blurry kind of cruise out flash of a song, I'd have to say in particular. It's like a snappy song, I'd have to say. It's pretty quick, less than 2 minutes. Less than 2 minutes, I'd have to say, but it's a good quick living type hit to kind of get in particular. And this is just some surreal vibes, I'd have to say it gives on the right day, I'd have to suppose. So it's just a concept. Really like the surreal feeling of this particular production pitches like that. This real blurry type one. This reminds me of some of the stuff that like more glitzy rappers like Ritz and Tech Nine kind of do some of those type pitches. Not to say that they're more glitzy than this particular cat, but just kind of the concept. Just a real extensive. This one's just a real glossy and kind of pizzazz type one to kind of get in particular. So that's a nice one. Then New Lights is a pretty good pitch of a song, I'd have to say. I really appreciate this one. It's like a creeping kind of out and about residential city bustle of a song, I'd have to say in particular. This one's like some great ruminating music, I'd have to say, especially while getting Subway or food pitches like that as far as that particular kind of goes. It's some good snackage, Popeyes, Subway, some of those type pitches. Just walking around residentially, some night type fare, night travel as far as that kind of goes. It's appreciating the city lights. I like the fact that this album saying old lights, new lights, because it's just a pretty good pitch to just having some good pizzazz as far as that kind of goes. Maybe you have a decent whip, maybe you don't, just kind of the pitch. If you're on foot or if you're in a whip, either way, it has some good pizzazz just for stepping out, just appreciating the city skies, getting some smokage pitches like that, getting some snackage, just texting some chicas on the phone pitches like that as far as that particular kind of goes. Just some good stuff. Is what I have to say. But I really like the haunting type glisteningness of this particular production on New Lights. I'd say it's probably one of the best ones on this particular album in terms of like some city type fare and just overall night pizzazz as far as that kind of goes. There's some good concepts for that. But to talk about some of the songs I didn't recommend on here. So basically some of these, like Look at Where I'm At is just kind of a poor type, homely type one to kind of get. And there's some other ones on here like I'd have to say like Can I Live is just there's just some ones on here that just kind of have some awkward type productions pitches like that. I have to say Peace of Mind. First song you hear, Peace of Mind, is just kind of one that just didn't really add up to much in terms of like the appeal towards it. It's supposed to be like a more fancier, like the first song you hear, Peace of Mind, was just trying to be like a fancy type one that just didn't pull out the vibes nearly as well as it needed to. It was just kind of an awkward one that probably didn't really belong on the album, I'd have to say. This thing with Doubted, I'd have to say that one was trying to be like a more fancy and homely type one that just didn't really pull out the vibe as far as that pitch kind of went. It was kind of one that reminded me of like Casey and JoJo's All My Life, just something that relative pitch, but really failed to kind of deliver as well as that particular song did it. I kind of feel like Can I Live was just kind of an awkward type one that didn't belong on the album either. It was just kind of one that didn't amount to much and didn't really serve much of a purpose as far as that pitch kind of went. And then Look at Where I'm At was just kind of a homely type one that just didn't really have much appeal either. So some of those type ones just didn't really deliver as far as that pitch kind of went. Eight me basically recommending 8.5 songs out of 13 on this particular album. That's kind of tricky. I think I'm gonna give this album like a 7.75 out of 10. I would give it a higher score, maybe like an 8 is almost what it deserves, but I kind of feel like it's not quite 9 out of 13. I'd have to suppose in particular. I'd have to say maybe an 11 out of 13 would probably be a 10 out of 10. 10 out of 13 would probably be like a 9. 9 out of 13, probably like an 8. So it's about 7.75 out of 10. I'd have to say in particular. It's pretty good pitch for that. The social score I'm going to surprisingly give. That's kind of another tricky one, but I think I'll give the social score as far as this particular album kind of goes, like probably like an 8.25 out of 10. I feel like it's the social score just fares better just because there's some good pitches here. I really do like some of this residential type stuff, just city hopping, whether in a car or on foot, some of those type pitches, just getting Subway and Popeyes. Swishers, some of that type of stuff. Just the standard fare, just texting Chicas pitches like that, just kind of getting on the grind. Some good stuff as far as that pitch can goes. Just some good city hopping, just appreciating the city, just romps pitches like that, just being out and about in the neighborhood, just more residential type fare and some of that type fare as far as that kind of goes. A little bit more low key than MGK, a little bit more low budget. Not to say it's low budget in terms of quality, but just the concept of just more appreciating the city and putting it on for your city as far as that pitch can goes. There's some good concepts there. It's 8.25. I don't really know if there's a single. I would assume it was repping that, something like that as far as that pitch can goes, considering that had MGK, but it might not have been. It might have been doing numbers, might have been dope, one of those type ones. It's a very low key type project, but it does have that relative appeal. It's not may not be full blown classic just because I feel like most folks would probably question who Dubbo kind of was. I would just refer to him, and so the folks less familiar, he could probably be seen as MGK's wingman. I'd say in particular, but some good enough concepts kind of get here. It's just some low key type stuff that has its appeal as far as that pitch kind of goes. So in terms of the future, like Dubbo has not put out a project since 2014. He's not as commonly on songs anymore either. The only real cat I know that's fucked with him like that, apart from MGK, is just Tezo. I'd say just folks from the ESD boys. I kind of might just be playing it low key pitches like that. He might have like some other songs that have been out since then. He might have dropped like some singles, but for the most part, it's just more low key type stuff. I'd have to suppose this is pretty much like his only album. Like I said, he does have at least a couple other mixtapes, one of which is a collabo mixtape with MGK. We're going to get to some of those as time goes along, but this is actually it's a pretty solid project here, but I'd say it's above average. I just would say in particular some good enough stuff upon it. Definitely the good social score, just the aspect of putting on for your city and just appreciating some of these midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday type songs as far as that kind of goes. Just for some good wing stop and kind of more romping around the neighborhood type music I'd have to say in particular. So some good stuff here.